And I guess kind of leaning into the stepping into the next trait, going from it has to be my idea. The sixth toxic trait we have is micromanaging. So you can think of number five as it has to be my idea. Number six is it has to be my way. And I think with micromanaging, I think it can be rooted in a couple of different things. I think inherently there's a lack of trust in your team members to be adults. There's also a failure on your part to motivate them properly. If you're having to micromanage, you're not in tune with how that person operates. And you need to incentivize them to perform better and to do better so that you're not constantly having to hold their hand, if that makes sense.
I think it also has to do with oh, I lost a word. Oh, communication.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're whether it's two EMTs or two paramedics, two critical care, whatever, two of the same cert, or even higher to lower cert, and like you're trying to go down a pathway, not everybody is going to look at the same patient and go down the same pathway the exact same way. Like maybe I would rather get an IV before I drop my drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Or you may prefer to drop your drugs and then get the IV.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you perceive that I'm not managing the scene well, then it might be, we need to be doing this, or, that level of
Mm-hmm.
micromanaging.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're on two completely different pathways, it's just maybe I go in a different order
Mm-hmm.
than somebody does. So we see that, within the field, but I mean, you also see that in management.
Mm-hmm.
And micromanaging is not going to get you anywhere. It's just not. It's going to be frustrating for literally everybody and add stress that shouldn't be there because we're already in a stressful job.
And I think there's some versions of this that are innocence not the right word, but that may be well intended because like it's very easy. I've seen with some people when they first get introduced to the idea of extreme ownership, they think that they have to take extreme ownership of every single detail that every single person is doing. And so they're micromanaging, but they're doing it from the perspective of, hey, I really want us to do well. I want us to succeed. I want things to go the right way. So here's how we're going to do things. And again, it's short sighted. It's not effective, but it's not malicious either.
No.
Now, I think there's some situations where it's again malicious isn't even the right word, but where
My
it's
way or the highway.
well, that gets I guess that mixes in with the autocratic mindset more so. Micromanaging specifically, I feel like you can't. You're not okay with someone doing things differently than you would do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of how what it boils down to. Or you think that this is the best way that something needs to happen, and if someone doesn't agree with that, it's very easy to treat them like a child. I think what a lot of agencies should do more of is, and not in a meeting because nobody wants to have these conversations in a staff meeting or at in service or whatever, but go one on one with your crews and sit down with them and say, hey, here's the deal. Here's where collectively or individually things are getting fucked up. Here's what we need to change. How are you going to help make this better? What are you going to do to participate to raise the bar on this? What are you willing to do to raise the bar on this? Get some people involved in it because you may actually get some feedback from people that can change your mindset and can affect your systems in your leadership of your department or of your shift or whatever the case may be.
I think somewhere to help this too is going to be better defined roles and responsibilities and having goals. Because, like, if you tell a team member, whether you're a leader, down to the field staff or field staff to field staff, if you have a general goal but you don't like lay it out, you have to do this step by fucking step. People know the general goal. You're
Mm-hmm.
communicating where we need to get, and it's up to the individual people how to do there. You can, maybe add in a couple extra steps, like we have to achieve this before we can reach the max goal.
Mm-hmm.
But like, the direction and order of how to do things should be left up to the people. I mean, they have their own autonomy. That's the whole point of being an EMS and having protocols.
I heard a quote. I'm pretty sure it was in a video that I shared on the EMS 2.0 page. I think it was there. Is the guy who hosts the Modern Wisdom podcast? I think it's like Chris Thomason. I forget his name, honestly. British dude. But he brought up the analogy of when you have a bunch of people that are running a marathon, they all have the same goal to finish the race. But how they get there, the exact strategies they use, the way they, regulate their fluid intake, how they're pacing, all of that's going to be different. And rather than try and force people into a sameness, if you will, you actually will get a lot more done if you let people just figure things out on their own. You give them the parameters, say, here's the objective, this is the standard, this is what needs to be met. How are you going to get there? And engage with them that way. And that way you're giving them back some power. Because even though you're in a position of authority, you're coming to them and saying, hey, how are you going to make this better? And I know for me, as a grown-ass man, I respond much better to that. Because then you allow me the opportunity to say, hey, let me do something that's genuine and that is, it works naturally for me and that I will actually be effective at.
So it's funny that you bring up children and everything. That kind of, no, we're not children. We do need to handle this as adults. But it reminds me of a book that someone had referenced to me when I was having some issues with Kaylee being defiant at, I don't know, teenage or 3, or maybe she was 4, somewhere in there.
The
And
time when most kids are defiant in some way,
oh,
shape, or form.
absolutely, there was nothing wrong with her or me or anything. But it just kind of reminds me. There's a passage in this book, and admittedly, I did not finish this book. Did not. I got what I needed and said, cool. But basically, this like section of the book was describing like if you have a child that I think the example was like getting dressed. Maybe it was getting ready for bed and like taking baths and stuff, and it was basically like the child is being defiant because they want to make their own decision. So if you give them like 2 or 3 options, they still get to pick, but the end goal is what you want. Like
Yes.
you want them to eat dinner, bathe, and go to bed. And if they're, well, I don't want to take a bath. It's like, okay, well, or I don't want to go to bed. This is some kind of
Mm-hmm.
combination. You give them the option, okay, I know you don't really want a bath, so you can either take it before dinner and get it over with, or you can have dinner, then take a bath, and we can read a story for bed. So like the child feels like they have
Mm-hmm.
decision, and they do have decision making powers, but
Mm-hmm.
the end goal is still what you want. So whether you're a field staff or a supervisor, not saying that like I need 2 different pathways
Mm-hmm.
explained to me,
Yeah.
but it's still having that autonomy to make the decision and not being micromanaged to get to said goal.
And what you're going to end up doing too, if you're a an authority figure at a service, and if you constantly micromanage, what you're going to do is you're going to decrease your people's free thought. Because they're going to go in this mentality of, well, all right, I'm just going to wait for that person to tell me exactly how they want me to do it.
Or I don't know how to do it.
Right. And instead, so you not only in the short term have frustrated them, but you're also demoralizing them and taking away their desire, because you're not rewarding them for investing in the job. You're not rewarding them for being creative, for finding, new ways to solve the problem that maybe you didn't think of. You're handicapping your people by micromanaging. I don't give a shit what your personality is. You're handicapping your people by doing it. And you need to stop it. It's not going to work.
Well, and honestly, I feel like that kind of ties into the next one that's disingenuine. So, if you have somebody that talks like your friend, is, besties, wants to get to know you, but then kind of behind your back, just like with any other relationship, they'll throw you under the bus when it's convenient for them in a hot ass second.
Mm-hmm.
They're only nice when it suits them.
And like I put out that video Sunday talking about the difference between being a nice person and a good person, and I think this is a classic example of that. If you have a supervisor who's being nice, or just in general somebody who's being quote nice, you describe someone as, oh, they're a nice guy. Well, what does that mean? Usually, people that are just nice, it's a switch that they turn on and off depending on what they need out of the situation or the person and what's strategic for them at that time. A good person is going to be good all of the time. They're gonna, not that they're perfect, not that they're perfect, but they're it's going to be their baseline.
Well, so I think kind of at least in my experience, I describe people as being nice. I think because nice, we've been so desensitized to like truly kind of what it means. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that person's nice. When really it should be, oh, that person's kind.
Mm-hmm.
Or like something a little bit more descriptive. Because like when I was a new hire at one of my jobs, I'd been there for a little while and had the reputation of being, quote unquote nice when really it should have been more descriptive than that. Well, I worked with
Mm-hmm.
this one female paramedic. I was still an EMT and I worked with this one female paramedic and we worked together for several shifts and she just kind of sat down and looked at me one day and she's like, "You're not what I expected." I was like, "Huh?" And she goes, "Well, you have the reputation of being nice." She was like, "And you've always been nice to me, when you say hi,
Mm-hmm.
in passing, blah, 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 even though I didn't really know you." She was like, "I genuinely didn't think it was real."
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That.
and I was like, "But like your description is nice." I was like, "Well, how?" And she said, "You're kind, you're good, you're caring." Because, like, if we stop,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what we've talked about before, if we're out and about, hey, do you need to stop anywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like nice is such a vague description that all of us, even me, still, I mean, I still describe people as nice. And I don't mean it that way.
Mm-hmm.
We almost need to be more specific because nice, kind of like what you're talking about and the way she described me, she's like, "I expected you to not be
Mm-hmm.
genuine."
Well, everybody likes nice, but they don't trust it. How many times have you met somebody and you're like, they're nice, but it's like weird.
See, but I read people so well.
But in general, that's pretty common to be able to look at somebody like, okay, they're nice, but but it's almost like they're too nice.
See, and I don't
Like it.
think anybody would ever describe me as too nice, which
No,
is
no, no,
why,
no.
like in my case, it wasn't descriptive enough.
But I'm saying her reaction to the quote nice reputation was hesitation.
Oh, well, yes, fair.
Because she's like, oh, she's so nice, and this and that. Like, because we just instinctively know, we subconsciously know that nice is a switch, and
Well, and she did refine how she described me.
no,
I'm agreeing with you.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm
I'm
agreeing with you. That
I think when you can say someone's good or someone's caring, when someone is truly caring, that bleeds through into everything they do. Even if they have to be bad cop on a call, let's say, or as a manager, supervisor, whatever. Even if they have to play bad cop under certain circumstances, the caring still comes through. And also, people who are good don't don't advertise it. They simply are.
oh, I see what you're
Whereas
saying.
it's just part of who they are,
Yeah.
and they know that. People who are nice, they have to find a way to advertise it, or they have to find a way to show how they're a victim in some part of their life, and be oh, I'm just a nice person. I don't understand why this happens to me or whatever. Fuck off, like that's not how this life works. If you're a good, you should be a good person because it's the right thing to do. But the quote nice guy syndrome, which I have personally just have such a in my heart about because it used to be me. But I think that bleeds over into other aspects of life too. Just in general, the niceness. I'm very leery of a supervisor who's very nice, but that doesn't have anything else.
Well, and with a nice person, as we've talked about, people are hesitant. But when you're genuinely good, And people are going to sense that. People are going to open up to you about that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my students joke, like when we're at clinicals, I know the nursing staff, the providers that come in. One of them jokes that like I know something personal about like almost everybody that I run into, and I'm like, it's not me being nosy. It's just have a genuine conversation, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's with your coworkers, your leadership, I mean, your patients. I mean, will I ever meet the same patient twice? Maybe, maybe not. For shits and
Sometimes
giggles,
you meet them 10 times.
or once up to 3 times a shift,
Yes.
depending on how frequent they are. Well, it's funny. Daniel and I don't even remember how it came up this morning. Daniel and I were trying to calculate roughly, and I'm talking like excessively roughly, how many patients we have met and cared for, what do we say, the past 5 years?
I calculated it for me for the last 5 years just because it was easy to do the math with my schedule, and I know roughly how much I've been working the last 5 years.
Well, I did the last 5 years. I think we said like 2018. And like, it's absurd to realize how many. I think we were somewhere between 5 and 7,000 patient, or no, 7 to 10,000.
No, I extrapolated my whole career that I'm somewhere in the 12 to 14,000 patient contact marks. Which gets really funny when you go back to the other conversation you and I had about how many strangers' boobs we've handled on the job.
I mean, yes,
You start doing that math, that's pretty fucking wild.
yeah, especially the shapes and sizes
Yeah,
and lengths
like
and
if I've done an average, let's just say lowball, 12,000 patient contacts,
that's like 6,000 boobs.
probably. I mean,
Well,
you figure I've done
pairs.
on the conservative end, assuming I don't do a 12 lead on every single, patient, on the conservative end, that's probably at least 3 or 4,000 sets of boobs.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, random note. No, we're not being creepy or weird. It's just this is the kind of shit you have to deal with in this job. You're
Yes.
exposed to bodily fluids and genitals of all shapes and sizes, and it is what it is. You have to laugh about it. If you don't like it, don't listen to the show. Straight up, just if you can't handle it, don't listen to the fucking show. You're not
And
gonna like it.
well, no, I was thinking like opening up as a good genuine person, but then you said genitals of all shapes and sizes, which reminded me of another hilarious call that I ran in Arkansas. But I'll save that one for another day. I'll save that another day.
I could never be a gynecologist. Have you ever thought about that? Like,
Well, it was actually a guy, so
that sounded like the State Farm commercial. Well, he's a guy, so, or she's a guy, so.
oh, I know.
Jake from State Farm.
Yes. But
But yeah, so just with when you have a disingenuous leader, it creates a very unsteady culture, and you can even see this between shifts. Like, you can see a difference between a shift where leadership is genuinely good people, genuinely good, caring people, and ones who just have that nice switch that they flip on and off. It's a palpable difference in how the day goes, how people behave, how they talk to or about leadership. It's really fucking weird. So I guess going on to our 8th trait of toxic leadership is gaslighting. And this is kind of a fun one in popular psychology because I didn't understand this term until actually fairly recently.
well, in its applications, again, we're not a relationship podcast, but I mean, the applications are literally across the board. I mean, every single relationship, whether it's romantic, whether it's children, friends, spouses, family, God, that's a huge one. But it even shows up in the workplace. I mean, it's a very subtle, well, it can be, it can be a very subtle, like, victimhood manipulation. And this is a negative manipulation. This is not, we talked about good and bad manipulation in our first authentic leadership episode, but this is a bad way to do it. One example is you may think things are good over at that other place, but they really aren't. You'll be back. Now,
Oh, have I heard that script before?
which, don't get me wrong, there is some truth to that. Every service, every place you work is going to have its problems. I could tell you something bad about every service in our
yeah.
area, but this whole, like, telling you what you think you know and then pulling it back, and it's like, oh, they're not actually good, like you'll totally be back. Like that's a perfect example of gaslighting.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's take a relationship, for example, like romantic, which
Mm-hmm.
I could see the applications with leadership as well. Let's say, no, Daniel is a wonderful, wonderful man. He does not do this. But let's just say, for shits and giggles, you are like coming at me, harassing me. You know, laundry's not done. You haven't cooked. The kitchen's not clean. Like blah 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 blah, blah, actively on me.
Literally everything that I tell her, I don't care. It's fine.
That's not the point. Some people experience this. And finally, when I like lose my shit that, you know, I'm working 3 jobs and got 3 kids and like can't handle this and I need some help. Like as soon as I lose my shit, the gaslighting is when you turn around and are calm. Is like, babe, I don't know why you're acting like this. I'm just trying to support you and, you know, help make a list of things that need to be done. It's turning around and it's using my final like explosion of I can't handle this anymore
Mm-hmm.
as like your justification for treating me like shit. Well, if you weren't such a psycho, we wouldn't have to talk about this. If you weren't such a lazy piece of shit mom, I wouldn't have to talk to you about the health of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and with I think in another other ways this shows up too is like where you'll be vocal about a set of problems that you notice in a place,
Mm-hmm.
and you're met with, "Oh, well, you know, it could be a lot worse," or,
Oh my god, I hear that often.
or my favorite, the a place I used to work at before, where the supervisor, it wasn't supervisor, it was like an upper level manager would keep paper copies of applications to a local gas station. And literally, if you came in to complain, he'd be like, "Well, you can fill that application out and go work there if you really have a problem with the way things are here." And I know that's not strictly gaslighting, but it's spinning this around to basically be like, "Well, you're kind of the problem.
Well,
You have all these problems, but you're really the problem, not
well, it's
us."
also I don't care.
Well, I don't give a shit. Like if you said that to me, I'd be like, "Fucking bet." Like,
But what I mean is they're telling the people basically
gotcha.
that they don't care. Not that
Agreed.
you would care, but
Gotcha.
like,
Gotcha.
you know, if you bring genuine concern, and I mean honestly, this can be applied. If you bring genuine concern, you have a supervisor who's inconsistent and disingenuine, and then they turn it around on you like, well, you know, I can't fire this employee that you're having problems with because no one else will report it. You know, why
Mm-hmm.
did you report it? Why didn't you do something more about it? I mean, we do see this in the field, and honestly, something that I've consistently been seeing an uptake in on social media is medical gaslighting, especially, not to play the sexist card, but especially for women. Because let's take women for example. We tend to not show, let's take heart attacks for example, as classically as men do. So, you know, if you have a disingenuine doctor who isn't going to be thorough, or not even a doctor, but a crew, you know, I think you've referenced it before, and someone goes mashing on the chest and they're like, well, yeah, that hurts. Like, oh, well, it's not a heart attack, it's muscular because I just
Don't.
shoved on your chest.
Oh, don't ever do that in front of me, ever. Any of you motherfuckers, if you run a call with me, don't ever fucking do that to a chest pain patient.
But
I
that's
will come unfucking glued.
But that's the point. It's medical gaslighting. You know, you have the lazy crews that don't want to do the work, and they're like, you know, they're gaslighting the patient. Oh, this isn't really what it is. Oh, you have a history of anxiety. You can't have a heart attack. Like,
Yeah,
what is that?
yeah. Like,
So, I mean, that you need to think of your words before you speak to literally anybody. You need to assess your safety at home, your children's safety,
uh-huh.
how you're talking to patients, how leadership is talking to you, you to them. Like, I mean, literally all of it. Like, gaslighting is a very toxic. I mean, honestly, of all the things and looking ahead to the next two, I really think gaslighting is probably the most dangerous.
Well, and there's a flip side to it where, like you and I have had it'll make sense. Give me a second.
Okay.
I say that look was murder.
Sorry.
No, so and what I'm about to say is just I can see someone taking this to an extreme. What we're saying, because we've had extensive conversations about the difference between perception and perspective.
I always mix them up, but yes.
So perception is the way you perceive the world around you. It is your filter that you have on the world. Now, that's not saying that, you're crazy just because you have a filter. Like, all of us have filters. We all have our own ways of looking at the world and interpreting different events. You and I deal with this all the time, where you're like, hey, I see these series of events. I'm kind of coming to this conclusion. I'm like, but I don't really see that because here's why. And perspective is being able to step outside of those filters, being able to put yourself into different shoes, look at something from different angles, evaluate it different ways to be able to figure out, okay, what is the actual truth? It's basically being able to say, I know I have a filter. How can I step around that filter? How can I step outside of it? So, in like personally, I don't want people to validate my perceptions. I want them to validate what's real, so I can learn to adjust my filter to what is actually really happening. So there may be times where you come with a complaint or you perceiving something a certain way, and good healthy management can say, "Hey, I hear you. We understand you, but here's what's actually going on." And they're not gaslighting you. They're doing they're communicating like healthy adults. So I just want to throw that clarification because I could see people kind of
Well, yeah,
going a different way with that.
yeah, we don't want these to like, be taken and ran with. Um,
Well, some of them, yes, but
well, some of
this
them.
one's a murky waters. It's deadly,
Well,
but
it is because I feel like it starts reaching into psychology, which there are so many facets to it. Because, like, as you're talking, it reminds me of something, and I know we've talked some about mental health. I swear it's not a long tangent. But the whole gaslighting, it is possible to gaslight yourself. If you think, let's say, for example, I think I'm a horrible mom. And I'm going to, my evidence, adding to my personal perception is, X, Y, and Z. These little, my kids had to have ramen 2 nights last week because I was working late. Or, I don't know, pick something. Pick something, and that's what I use as evidence as to why I'm a bad mom. Well, so my trauma counselor told me that there's like this 2-step question. I can't remember the exact wording of it, but she basically told me, and I think everybody should do this. If you're struggling with something, whether it's management or personally or anything else, take whatever that bad thought is. So let's take that example of I'm a bad mom. My trauma counselor told me that I need to think of who do I love and trust the most. And, it was, Daniel or one of my best friends. And they're like, okay, who want the best for you, right? And I was like, yeah. She said, if you said, whatever this belief statement is to them, what would they tell you in return? And, I said whatever I think they would say. And you can either do this by yourself or you can do it, actually with that person. And, whatever their answer is. And she's like, okay, now, obviously, since we're here, you're going to have a problem with that, not a problem, but like disagree with that statement. She's like, what is your evidence that you are right versus what is their evidence as to why they are right? And it's supposed to challenge that perception.
yeah. And so it's one of those things that requires wisdom, and don't just go because gaslighting also is becoming a pop term, and I feel like it's going to get overused for a little while because it's suddenly just like hip hop the main stage of pop psych for the last probably I guess year 2 years maybe.
Well, and I don't mean to be hateful because there are, especially in romantic relationships, where gaslighting is a problem. But I feel like, especially with some of the offended snowflakes in the world, if they're not getting their way, they immediately call it gaslighting. So I feel
Yeah.
like it is one of those things that this word, whether it's professional or personal, is going to get over exaggerated and overused, which, not to go off on a soapbox, but for those of us that have been gaslighted and abused, that it's hard to not trauma compare and get pissed when it's being overused in that sense. So gaslighting in the field might not be as bad as you think it is, but we still need to be aware of it.
Agreed. Agreed. You need to keep your wits about you and actually be cognizant of what's happening, and not trying to find a villain that isn't there, or at least isn't doing that exact same thing. Like you and I talked some about this. I think that was the dark side of the Me Too movement when it first hit. Yes, the Me Too movement did so much good. Cleaned up a lot of Hollywood, cleaned up, it implemented a lot of good, healthy practices. But there were also some negative side effects that came from it as well. And I think that some of that stuff has sort of tapered off a little bit. But it kind of got in this position where suddenly guys were just like, well, fuck it, I don't want to ask anybody out because I'm going to get, quote, me too'd. And that overuse of it devalues the good, healthy uses of it. So we're bringing up gaslighting not to just give you a tool to beat the backs of everybody you disagree with, but more as just a, hey, keep this on your radar. This is something that happens, but don't go finding that villain everywhere around you.
I think it kind of gets applied to just like when we talked about food, it's all things in moderation. Because you can say the same thing about, not to get political, but like Black Lives Matter or, the different genders and everything. There's somewhere in between all of the extremes, like somewhere in the middle is the true good. Does that make sense?
The true perspective.
The true perspective, the true good, like, the good movements, Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, all the things, like there was a genuine good purpose in the beginning, but if you run with it and look for the bad, you're gonna find it everywhere. And I mean, at that point, everybody needs to be burned at the stake. Like you can't go that direction and apply it to everything, because then we really will ruin not just the field but the world. I mean, you can't find bad in everybody. No one's perfect.
People want something to believe in. They want a cause, and especially with the advent of social justice warriors, that has just gone to the max, and it's fucking eating us alive as a culture now. Thankfully, EMS is a little bit behind the curve in that we're all generally a little more conservative, broadly speaking, but I think some psych stuff we actually fall behind in a bad way.
Agreed, especially in mental health. But kind of adjacently feel like that kind of plays into number 9. Number 9 is going to be playing favorites. I mean, playing favorites is self-explanatory. It's exactly what it sounds like. You should treat people according to how they perform, not according to whether you like them or not. If they fluff your ego. I can't remember what episode it was, but we referenced, if you want to make a whole clique, whether you're a supervisor or a field personnel, based on what your certification level, because, critical care is, God, and in EMS is like, that's not appropriate. And well, but I mean, you totally know it's true. And like, if you're giving preferential pick of trucks and shifts, or, preferential, as a part-time.
Days off.
Well, days off. Oh God, that'll piss off some people quick. Or like, as a part-timer, I want to sign up for some days. And the day that I signed up for, I didn't get. But then when I look on the fucking schedule, I see a full-timer is working overtime shift. It's like, what the fuck? Why am I not getting those hours? That's the whole point of me working. It's to help, 1, I have a livelihood. 2, it's supposed to help cut down the overtime on the company. Boo fucking who that person has to pay for their family. I do too.
Well, and this comes back to the kind of the statement we had before of treating people according to their behavior. And there's the negative side of that, which is you punish people according to their failures. But on the positive side, you can give some grace to people who are performing well. But that is the key right there, is they are performing well to an objective, consistent, equally applied standard. So, and I'd had this at another service that I worked at in the past. I would show up like 45 minutes to an hour early every day. Every fucking day.
We still consistently, like, maybe 30 minutes early.
I really don't do that much anymore. But that's a whole separate conversation. But at that time, that was my pattern. I was there all the time. I'd relieve people early. People weren't getting off late. If I was your relief, you were not fucking getting off late. Period.
I mean,
So
I was the same way.
yeah, and now when there would be a time where I would oversleep, which for those of you who know me know that I truly have nightmares about being late to work. That is an obsession. That is one of the few obsessions I have, is not being late. But when it would happen, I would text my supervisor, or call him, or whatever, and be like, "Hey, I'm sorry, this and that." He'd look at me and be like, "I don't fucking care." He said, "You're here early all the time. I ain't worried about it. I ain't saying shit. I ain't writing up shit. You're fine." And that's a reward. At least that's the way I look at that. That's not preferential treatment. That's, hey, you are consistent. This is an aberration. Something happened. All right, cool. Not really worried about it. That's okay.
Oh yeah,
So
no.
there's a difference. There's a distinction here to be made.
Oh, 100%. I'm not talking about like you. I need to think of wording. I'm not talking about it in that instance. It's like if you have been consistent, you get that grace. It's like, okay, being late for work, or both of us sharing in the rigorous accountability episode, the med errors and everything. Us not getting like attacked or talked to or remediated because historically we don't make those errors. It's having that grace and then being like, we talked about it. You knew what you did like at the time, you get that good reputation of consistency. I'm talking about playing favorites of, this person's going to get preferential pick just because they're besties with the supervisor or the
Yeah.
scheduling lady, or they're not going to get in trouble because of who they know.
Yeah.
They're historically lazy pieces of shit that are bad partners who bitch about, a disabled person having a special job, and they're still going to get whatever the fuck they want, even though they consistently have showed that they're inconsistent and not good at their job, or just because of a certification.
Yeah. And I understand that we have friendships in these jobs, and people who get promoted do have friends that are below them on the chain. So I understand that it's difficult. And I think this is where something that I have tried to make a practice in my life is I separate the way I look at people in terms of how I see them at work and how I see them as people. You may not be the greatest paramedic on the planet. Cool. Or people at work may just not like you. But you know what? You've done right by me. You've been a good friend to me. You've been honest with me. You've earned my loyalty and respect. Cool. I don't give fuck all whether or not you're good at checking off your truck or getting all your station duties done every day. That has no impact on my ability, my friendship with you. So I think that there being a compartmentalization like that is important, and it can come into play of preventing this kind of situation where you shouldn't be playing favorites. I know we say it. I know it's, the PC thing that you're not supposed to play favorites, but for fuck's sake, really, don't play fucking favorites. And stop trying to be the favorites. This cuts to the brown nosers too. Like, and everybody sees who you are. Like, don't even.
Oh, everybody talks about it because we're like,
Yeah,
ugh,
everybody fucking knows, whether they talk about it or not. Everybody fucking knows.
your nose is so brown because you're up your supervisor's ass.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
well, and those providers always, oh, well, this supervisor this, or oh, I had lunch with so and so, and
nobody fucking cares.
oh yeah, oh, I can't get in trouble because I know this supervisor. I'm best friends with his wife. Like it doesn't matter. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a gray area. So like, in theory, if, I was a supervisor and my, bestest friend in the whole world got in trouble for some shit, would I want to help them maybe not get fired, but get like a fuck ton of, remediation or something? Like, I understand we're emotional beings. We're human. But there still comes a point where there has to be, kind of like we shouldn't treat our own family. If you're really that close with somebody and they're in a shitload of trouble, you need to have the humility and leadership to step back and be like, I can't fairly deal with this. I need, which is why I think it's good that, a shift is not QAing their own shift people.
Yeah. And I think it applies too, and I've seen it before. with certain people that will protect their favorite crews. And when the Frozen Chosen get a call, they'll try and pass the call off to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, I have no problem if I'm lucky enough to be on the Frozen Chosen crew or whatever. Like, I'm not going to complain about not running calls because I have shit to do. But it's truly not. I also don't believe that you should like sandbag people for running calls. If there's a reason to keep my truck available for something, cool, that makes sense. That happens sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's fine, but that's going to kind of play into if I'm going to be sandbagged and it's obvious, I'm going to start taking my time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not clearing that fucking hospital when I'm done with, patient transfer in
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes. I'm going to wait my 30 minutes and finish my chart and pee and get something to eat. Like, if you're going to sandbag me, I am going to go slower for my own health and safety.
And plus, if you're protecting certain crews, that even especially if they didn't ask for it, if they don't want it, or they're not trying to get special treatment, but if you just do it, it's kind of like in the old mob movies when they'd like make someone look like a rat even though they weren't because they knew that they would get strung up. It's kind of the same thing. You're doing it to these people that are legitimately good people, and I've seen this too.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people get butthurt over it and don't trust them and don't want to be around them and all of that because they just assume that they're brown nosers or whatever. That's not right either. You don't want to have those kinds of relationships going on.
Well, and not taking that crew's wishes into account kind of plays into our 10th and final kind of toxic leadership, or I mean even crew traits that we've been talking about. So you have your autocratic leadership mindset. So the kind of definition that we have is the leader takes no account of other people's wishes or opinions. So that's kind of your tyrant, oppressive, totalitarian providers.
Mm-hmm. It's and unfortunately it gets masked in this. Oh well, I've been doing this for 40 years, and this is just the way I lead. Yeah, no, that's not really how this works. Just because you've been doing it a long time doesn't mean that you're the expert. Doesn't mean you're not the king. None of us voted you king. Like, you need to realize that the other people around you, and again, this swings back to the micromanaging thing. The people around you are going to have different ideas. They're going to have different ways of doing things. And guess what? They may be a lot fucking smarter than you are. And you need to be able to step back and say, hey, you know what? You got a fucking point. Let's give that a whirl. And then you know what? If it doesn't work, cool. Then everybody learns the lesson. Nobody was butthurt over not getting to do something because then you tried it and it didn't work. But when this becomes the pattern, when someone by default is just giving everybody marching orders all the time and doesn't allow people to voice anything different, any opposition, you're going to beat down your people, you're going to break their morale, and they're not going to have any desire to do better or to better the team.
Well, and I feel like this is one of those things that there is a time and a place where this is required. All of us have been on fire scenes before, mass casualty, whatever. You have to have one leader that's like
Yes.
giving marching orders. But that is like one particular situation. As a leader, whether actual management or, the lead provider on the truck on a call, you have to be able to change leadership and communication types, just like you change algorithms and treatment
Uh-huh.
pathways. On a mass casualty incident, you need one leader, an autocratic leader, who has the subordinates that are giving information up the chain, and you take into consideration, but they have the final say. Versus on any other given one, it's kind of like with children. How you parent one child may not parent well with the other. We were trying to get our daughter, we were trying to get her to learn her spelling words by having her write it, 10, 15, 20, 50 times, however long it took. And she was not doing well. We'll come to find out she's an auditory learner. If she looks at a word, spells it out loud, like no lie, maybe 5 times, She can spell like the craziest ass words. She pulled anticlimactic out of her ass out of after spelling it like 5 times, and they could spell it like forever.
Mm-hmm.
So even with leadership, and treatment pathways and everything, you need to be able to change it based on what you need at that time. But being, the tyrant, totalitarian leader all the time is not going to work.
And you'll have times where no, seniority is not king, but sometimes it's the biggest stick in the room. Like sometimes you'll have this with students, especially when you're a student, like actually formally a student, learning a particular certification, skill set, whatnot. You are there to learn. You are not. You can offer different study habits for stuff, but you are there to absorb and internalize the material. And the whole point is for you to be wrong. And that's how you learn. You learn in that school setting where people with objective truth and experience and standards are telling you and reinforcing with you, this is the way it is. This is what you need to do. This is what's expected of you, and be able to tell you when you're wrong in certain situations.
You opened that door for me, didn't
I
you?
sure the fuck did.
So I think this very much so ties into your offensive stuff as well. So your
All my
personal.
stuff's offensive. What are you talking about?
Oh, stop. Well, just like you saw earlier with my face looked offended. I looked like I was murdering you with my eyeballs, but my words were nothing. Anyways, so you have your personal
Silence.
offense and your principally offensive stuff. So, if you have a student, and we've had this, who says, or not says, but asks if they can skip the cardiology class because they're self-studied. You literally can't get butthurt when you're told no. Like, that's not personally attacking you. That's the principle of you can read a book as much as you want, but I guarantee you, even Daniel and I'll text Daniel occasionally. I'm like, hey, what do you think of this rhythm? Because this rhythm looks fucked
Fuck
up.
if I know half the time.
Yeah, well, and I'll even go to some of my coworkers now who used to be my instructors, and I had one video and all 4 of them in the department, or 5 of them in the department, were like, what the fuck is this? I was like, I don't know. So like, there's a reason. Just because you're self-studied and read a book doesn't mean that you should automatically get credit for a college class, and getting offended by that is so stupid. The principle of it is you need a good education. You need to learn this, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, more than likely you're wrong. I have run some fucked up calls that I thought I knew what I was doing, and then when you look at the whole thing and find out later what it was, you're like, wow. Even as a seasoned provider, I never would have known that.
Yeah.
And one other thing that is kind of brought up with this that we have, at least I have been noticing, and I've heard some feedback from other people, if you have an EMT class that collectively is complaining on every single provider because literally you are being quoted as, oh, you're disrespectful because I was told I was wrong. Like, I had this one student who, just going through, a medical scenario, gave them the most basic, like, chest pain call an EMT could run. And they missed more than half. I'll be nice and say half of the registry sheet. I mean, it was a fail, no question about it. So I went through literally row by row, step by step, and was like, hey, you did great here. Like, let's talk about this. Well, for example, with this one, we got a sample, and I looked at the student. I was like, well, you asked about medications. Why not pass pertinent medical history? Oh, well, I already knew the medical history because of the medications.
Oh, bullshit.
Yeah, I was like,
Bullshit.
well, don't get me wrong.
You can learn a lot.
I can look at a med list and guess what a person has, but I've also been in the field for years. We're talking about this child. This person is an adult, by age, but I say child because like they're new to the field. I just a baby. Asked, and I was like, okay, cool, let's go over the medication. So I had given them literally the most basic. So I was like, okay, metformin. Oh, diabetes. Okay, cool. Lisinopril. Well, I don't know which one, but they have a psych disorder. I literally had no words. I was
I
like,
think they were confusing Lexapro. Is the only thing I can guess on that.
And maybe so, but when I'm sitting here saying, no, honey, lisinopril, like I can spell it for you, you can Google it, is an ACE inhibitor. It literally, because like I know Cymbalta has like an off-label use for like 20 different disorders ranging from fibromyalgia to psych. Lisinopril is not one of those. But when you're sitting here arguing with me, go, well, I was pre-med.
Keyword there being
Well,
was.
was, but whether it's was or present, I literally don't give a shit. It literally cannot be used for psych.
Yeah.
So, like, you can't assume. Well,
Because we all know what they say about people who assume.
make an ass out of you and I, or you and me.
Yes.
But, like, I'm a very blunt, straightforward person. So, like,
No.
So, I mean, I understand that my conversation with him was probably not, oh my God, honey, you did so good. Like, let's just talk about this. That's not me.
No.
But did I call this person stupid? Did I tell them they were going to fail and be horrible? No, none of those.
They probably will if they haven't already.
But point being, I wasn't disrespectful, but I know myself I was straightforward. But I told the several students actually, what they did well. Well, when you take it personally, when it's not intended to be that way, and go tell my boss word for word, I'm a bitch and I'm disrespectful and I don't know how to communicate with people and have no business being in education, along with another lead instructor, that's
Yeah.
just, I tell you, this happened weeks ago and I'm still fucking hot about it because we've consistently had problems. But like, you can't just assume that you can, like, with the whole, autocratic, you have to be in the mindset of your role. Now, no, leadership doesn't get, absolute say so. You need to be able to change between the different pathways.
Well, and there can be a gray area with this because just like in a parenting situation, yes, you want to engage the kids. You want to teach them to be able to make decisions and be functional. But there's times where it comes down to, hey, I said fucking no.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times where that is necessary, but that should be a last resort, not your default position. Because when you're in a school context, the students are there to learn. Period. The fucking end. Mm-hmm. They are not the teachers. They do not become the teachers. No. They may teach each other things, but they do not teach the teachers.
Well, there's a gray area because I feel like students can, because they have the fresh perspective, bring a certain level of research to the table, but it has to be verified. It's not that they're an expert in the situation. Everybody has something to learn from everybody to an extent.
Yes, but I'm saying just, again, positionally. They
Yes.
may challenge you in your teaching and may point out where you have not taught clearly or correctly or currently.
Okay,
But
that makes more sense.
right, but ultimately, but that doesn't change their position. Their position is they're there to fucking learn.
Well, yes.
Now, when you get out into the workplace, yes, you still have a positional difference between someone who is a supervisor or a captain or whatever your terminology is at your service. But you are also all equally certified. So, like, I may have a supervisor who is a paramedic. Well, guess what? I'm a paramedic too. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to paramedicing things, I have as much of a say-so as they do. So I think we lose that sometimes, where sometimes supervisors want to act like they're still the teacher.
Yeah.
And yes, you can teach, but that's not your job. Your job is to get the team to work effectively together. And for a team to work effectively together, each member of the team needs to be allowed to blossom and grow in their position and function to their fullest capability. And you're not going to do that if you squash them at every turn with, no, it's my way, period, the end.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that one.
Well, I think that wraps them all up pretty well. I think this is definitely going to turn into a two-parter episode because we're already almost at another hour.
Well,
so,
shit.
Yeah. But anyway, I've loved it. I think this has been good, and I hope that y'all have taken away some good input from this, despite our extensive storytelling and rabbit trails. this is something that I'm this is a particular topic that I am very passionate about, and we opened the podcast with this topic, and I think it's only fitting we really come back and show it some love. So, hope you learned a lot. Hope you were offended in a principled way. If you're someone who is in a position of authority, you'll take a good hard look at yourself and be willing to change some things. Doesn't matter how long you've been a supervisor or a crew chief or a lieutenant or what the fuck ever your title is. Take some time, be introspective, and work with your people. Be transparent with your people. If you've been fucking some shit up, go apologize to your people. If anything that we say resonates with you, and you feel that you have done this or are doing these things, go talk with your people and apologize. Be vulnerable with them. Yeah, you're going to have some dumbasses that are going to just mock it and not give a shit. But the people that you actually want to care and to be on your side, they're going to listen. They're going to appreciate it. Anybody with some decent emotional intelligence is going to appreciate an apology for any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of conversations we need to have, because you know what? It's a lot easier for someone to say, you know what? I appreciate you saying that, and I'm sorry I kind of been a dick too. And it's a lot easier when we all get in that posture of accepting the blame for our own shit. And we can actually start making some headway to bettering the culture of our industry. So, on that note, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
The Paramedic AF show is property of the EMS 2.0 project. The beliefs, opinions, and practices discussed in the show are our own and do not represent our respective employers. Please follow your local protocols, policies, and procedures at all times. All listeners are encouraged to research and self-educate regarding all content represented in this show. For more information regarding EMS 2.0, please visit our Facebook page for our website and social media links. Thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to you joining us next time.